Story 1. This happened several years ago, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath. I went out to buy some things from the supermarket with my boyfriend, now husband. I looked so obviously feminine that even a less observant person wouldn't think I worked at the store. I was wearing a dress and heels, for goodness sake. My boyfriend was in a separate aisle, and I was quietly looking through the shelves for my items, not bothering anyone, when someone sharply tugged at my elbow, nearly causing me to stumble. It was a woman referred to as entitled mom, glaring at me. Her teenage child was standing behind her, looking extremely embarrassed. Entitled mom, where do I find the wine? Me. I don't know. You should ask an employee. Please let go of me. Entitled mom looking me up and down. You are an employee. Just be quiet and help me, or I'll get the manager. At this point, I had read enough stories to know how this would end. I politely told her to leave me alone and walked away. The next thing I knew, something hit me hard in the head. I genuinely thought I was dead for a second. It didn't even occur to me that something was wrong until I realized I wasn't moving, even though I thought I was. The only thing keeping me upright was gripping the shelf. There was a lot of yelling, but I couldn't focus on what was happening. Eventually, I lost the battle and passed out. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital. My boyfriend filled me in on what had happened. When I turned around and walked away, entitled mom became so furious that she grabbed a glass jar and hurled it at my head. Despite her fault, she had excellent aim. The injuries were severe, and she cracked my skull open. Bystanders alerted the staff, and the manager came over. Security detained her until the police arrived. My boyfriend arrived on the scene and got me to the hospital in time. Even then, she kept saying she was trying to teach me a lesson for looking down on her. Her husband came to the hospital with their children. I don't think they were prepared to see the extent of my injuries. Her husband broke down in front of me and told me she wasn't the woman he had loved. Later, I found out through my lawyers that he served her divorce papers. Her family covered all my medical expenses without us asking. Her husband seemed like a really nice man. It's been a few years, but I always wondered why she was so angry when she clearly had a family who loved her. A part of me will always wonder that. Eventually, she was charged and sentenced to prison. The case actually wrapped up a few weeks ago. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison on multiple charges. Along with her jail term and her personal life falling apart, she also had to cover my legal expenses entirely up front. Her lawyers tried every underhanded trick to prolong the case, but it ultimately backfired as she had to pay for the delays. She also had to pay for my therapy, also upfront. I've been enjoying the peace for the past few weeks, staying inside with my family. For a while, I had memory issues that slowly improved. For a solid year after the incident, I couldn't step outside my house due to the intense fear that something or someone would attack me. With therapy, and better, I still can't enter grocery stores, which are referred to as department stores in the States, I think, but I'm hoping to overcome this hurdle too. My husband, the boyfriend in the story, also had to go to therapy. He still sees me lying in a pool of my blood in his nightmares sometimes. I wouldn't wish this experience on my worst enemy, even though it ultimately worked out in a way, I guess. But so many lives were destroyed because of her rage. What was she so angry about? I guess I will never know. But there are silver linings. I'm pregnant with my first child, and despite the nausea, somehow my little one is giving me the strength to overcome more and more each day. Anyway, the case is wrapped up, so I thought you might like to read this story. Thanks for sticking around. Edit. I didn't expect this story to gain so much attention. Thank you for the awards, the hugs, and the love. I am doing much better today. It's only onward from here. A special thank you to the dear friends who have shared stories of their trauma. I replied to you personally, and will say it again here. We are only as strong and capable as the people around us. When crippled with fear, I will remember the child I am about to have and your stories. Together, we will overcome fear and live with kindness and courage. Thank you for the good wishes for my baby. I call the baby Bean because it's a cute pet name, isn't it? I'm thinking about continuing to call the baby that name even after they're born. Some commonly asked questions. Did she express remorse? No, she never did. She was asked to take the stand once, and it was the only time during the trial we saw her cry and break down. But even then, she blamed me for ruining her life. There was no apology and no explanation. It was a random, brutal, and senseless act of violence designed to hurt me. How are you now? Much better, thank you. I'm still going to therapy and taking it one day at a time. My husband is better too. His nightmares have significantly reduced. One day, this will just be a scary story. Why didn't you pursue maximum compensation? For a variety of reasons. I had a good support system that rallied around me. My boss at the time didn't cut my pay. I was a valuable employee in his organization. So they gave me paid leave, so I didn't qualify for lost wages. She had to pay for my therapy up front and also my legal expenses, which were quite significant. Her husband had divorced her, so she was paying all this out of her own pocket, whatever savings she had accumulated. This shouldn't have affected my decision, but it did. Despite everything, I never wanted revenge, just justice. In which country did this happen? This case was quite famous, so forgive me for not disclosing which country I'm from. If I told you that, you'd immediately find out my name, and that's not acceptable. What now? Nothing. The last few years have been insanely crazy. My husband and I are just happy to exist with each other. Each day is a gift, and we intend to treat it as such. What happened to her family? I will paraphrase a comment I made to someone. The day her family came to visit me at the hospital was one of the worst memories of my life. I'll never forget that day. We all broke down crying, her children, husband, me, and my boyfriend. So many lives were destroyed because of this woman and her rage. At some point, her children, a son who looked around 11 and a daughter who looked around 16, came forward and hugged me as we all cried. I remember being so afraid, but at the same time being unable to move. I was literally paralyzed by fear. I didn't even realize I was crying until the children came forward and embraced me. My boyfriend was already embracing me, crying into my shoulder. Later, we found out they had paid for all the expenses I had incurred in the hospital. We were afraid this was to avoid legal recourse, but it wasn't. I genuinely believe her husband only had good intentions. After that day, I heard they filed for divorce. Her husband never came to court. After that day, we never interacted again. Her children came to court to testify, but it was obvious to everyone watching that this family was broken. The children said she was a good mother to them, but her daughter broke down crying on the stand when my lawyers asked her if she could describe that day from her perspective. It was clear she was terrified to see her mother in that light. After their testimonies, they didn't want anything to do with her or her court proceedings. Will you meet them? No, right now I can't. There are too many horrible memories. Maybe in a few years. I don't know. Edit 2. This has gained significant attention. My husband and I went through your comments. There are so many kind messages I can't reply to all of them, but please understand that I am slowly but surely going through all of them at my own pace. Thank you for all your well wishes for me, my husband, and our baby. Good night. I love you all. Story 2. I'm not quite sure this fits, but I wasn't sure where else it would. I've had a friend since college who's a great guy. I love him to pieces, but I've occasionally considered ending the friendship because his wife is so jarringly clueless. For the life of me, I don't know what he sees in her. Well, I do. She's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in real life. But even so, I don't know how he manages. She's sweet, she means well, but there are sandwiches more intellectually stimulating. A while back, I had a friend visiting, Camden, and she was dropping her kids by to hang out with mine. I invited her to stay for a bite to eat because, yes, she's extraordinarily clueless, but she's perfectly friendly. Camden has been trying to break into acting and recently had a bit part on a television medical drama. So I brought it up, saying, Camden recently had a small role as a doctor on this show. She responded, "Ah, that's so exciting. Congratulations. That must not be easy to get a job there. So, what kind of doctor are you?" And he explained, "Oh, it was a very minor role. I didn't get a specialty or anything. I didn't even get a name." And she laughed and said, "Well, we all feel that way when we first start, regardless of the job. Just keep working hard, and you'll get all that stuff over time. But don't sell yourself short. It's not easy to be a doctor." He took the compliment and went into how he approached playing the role, the body language he tried to adopt for the intensive care unit. that sort of thing. Then she cut him off and said, "Actually, you know what, if you wouldn't mind, my son has had this oblong cyst developing on the small of his back for a couple of weeks now. I'd really appreciate it if you could take a look." We both laughed, thinking she was joking, and I was impressed with her unusually high-level joke. But then she actually started to call her son over. It's just like her to start a funny joke and then take it way too far. Camden, confused and weirded out by the whole thing, started saying, "Oh, no, they didn't teach us any medical stuff for the part. I can't, help you with this." I jumped in and changed the subject, but she left shortly after. I had long since given up on trying to explain to her why some jokes are funny and others are not, so I thought I'd let it be, even though she seemed kind of miffed when she left. Later, she came back to pick her kids up, and by then Camden had gone home. As she was leaving, she remarked, "You know, it was very rude of your friend not to at least look at my son's cyst. It would have taken him, 10 seconds. I hate how doctors think they're above helping anyone unless they're getting paid. Didn't they take an oath to always help anyone who needs medical advice or something?" As I processed the pure bitterness in her voice, I realized she genuinely and truly thought Camden was a medical doctor. Convinced I must be misunderstanding her, I further reiterated, No, he's an actor. He played a doctor. On that show, you've seen the show. It's not a small production. It's like Grey's Anatomy or House, everyone knows of it." Even angrier now, she said, "Of course I have. I know all about it. It's one of the best hospitals in the country. Why do you think they put it on TV? Being in the spotlight like that, you'd think you'd try and be a little more professional with people. That's all I'm saying." The surreal mix of entitlement and delusion in her statement left me dumbstruck. I decided I must be misinterpreting this somehow because there was no way any grown adult who votes, drives, works, and has kids of her own could be that oblivious, not even her. So I just let her leave rather than risk offending her or embarrassing myself. As soon as she was gone, I called my friend, her husband, to try and catch him before she got home. I relayed the whole series of events to him, and his response, "Yeah, it's a problem, but it's not entirely her fault. Oftentimes, those shows use stories ripped from the headlines of the actual news, you know? So you can see why she gets mixed up sometimes." She bumped into Camden at my anniversary party not long after and asked him, with genuine concern, if a character on the show who had been in an accident again on the show was recovering well. He tried telling her in plainer terms, "I don't work there. I'm not a doctor. I just played one that one time." And she said she was so sorry to hear he'd been let go, and asked where he was working now. So, if you wonder how our country ended up where it is, know that she has a bachelor's degree from an accredited college and holds a job with several subordinates and partial responsibility over our city's water supply. So, advocate for education reform whenever you can, and enjoy these twilight years of the great American experiment. Story 3. This is a little unconventional. 15 years ago, I lived in California, and the rest of my family was in Florida. My sister and I planned a surprise party for my mom and stepdad's 30th anniversary. I flew in with my husband and 5-year-old, not telling anyone. It was going to be a huge surprise. That afternoon, my sister and I went to the local drugstore to fill up helium balloons for the party. I was behind the counter doing the balloons when my grandmother came into the store to help my sister. She was right in front of me and didn't look in my direction. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you with anything?" Grandma said she didn't need any help, again not looking at me. I got pushy and asked her again. "No, I'm fine, thanks." Again, I asked if she needed help, and she finally turned her head to look at me. Then she shrieked my name, so excited to see me. No, I didn't work there. Grandma is gone now, and so is Mom. This is one of my favorite memories of my grandma. She was so happy to see me. I miss you both. Story 4. This doesn't quite fit as this isn't exactly about being mistaken at work, but it's about mistaken identity. Moderator, please remove if this is the wrong sub. I've owned my phone for a while and my current number for over a decade, but when I first got my phone, there was a time when things were odd. This was more than 10 years ago, probably 20 years ago. Every once in a while, every few weeks, I would get a random text or call that generally went like, "I'm back in town. Look me up. I'm ready to party if you are." I generally replied, "Wrong number," and didn't think any more of it. It wasn't until I got, "When are you available, and what are your rates?" that I realized what was going on. So I started searching my new phone number online. You probably guessed it. There was my number next to a different name on a website listing party boys, and let's leave it at that. I sent an email to the website administrator explaining the situation. I had to try a couple of different variations, but they did purge my number within 3 weeks. The calls and texts stopped coming. Sorry, no angry individuals demanding where I hid the other guy.